In the spring of 1859, a family of 11 lived in a narrow hollow deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains of western Virginia. They had a working farm, a grist mill on the creek, a family name that showed up in the county tax rolls going back 3 generations. And then, over the course of a single night, all 11 of them were gone. Not just the people, the farm, the mill, the wagon road that led up to it. And here is the part that no one has ever been able to explain. Within a year, almost every written record that the Blackwood family had ever existed had quietly vanished as well. And, before we go further, I need to pause for a second, because what I'm about to tell you gets significantly darker. And I realized a while ago that some of this cannot be fully explained in a video format. The complete reconstruction of the Blackwood family record, the 11 names struck from the county ledger, the survey coordinates of the hollow that no longer appears on any map, and the county council's own handwritten order to remove them, copied word for word. I put it all into a written document. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now, let's continue. To understand how strange this is, you have to understand how records worked in 1859. This was not some lawless frontier with no paper trail. Western Virginia in the middle of the 19th century was surveyed, taxed, mapped, and churched. Every acre had an owner on file. Every birth, marriage, and death passed through a clerk's hand and ended up in a ledger bound in leather and stored in a courthouse. A family did not simply fall out of the record. The system was built specifically so that could never happen. And yet the Blackwoods did. We know they were real because of the gaps they left behind. A tax assessor's summary from 1857 lists the total acreage under cultivation in their district, and the numbers only add up if you include a large parcel in the upper hollow. But the page that should name the owner of that parcel has been cut out, not torn, cut, a clean straight edge, the kind you get from a razor drawn along a ruler. And it is not the only cut. The district's marriage register for the 1840s skips from one bound section to the next with a gap in the page numbers, right where a Blackwood wedding should have been entered. The church that served the valley kept its own book of baptisms, and that book survives almost intact, except for a single leaf that has been removed so cleanly the binding still lies flat. Whoever did this was not in a hurry, and they were not careless. They knew exactly which pages named the family, and they took only those. The neighbours remembered them, at least for a while. A woman named Eliza Furman, who lived 2 ridges over, gave an account to a travelling minister in 1861. She described the Blackwoods as quiet people, hard workers, a father and mother and their children, and an older couple, the grandparents. She said they kept to themselves, that they had lived in that hollow longer than anyone could remember, and that the stonework around their property was older and finer than anything the local men knew how to build. She also said something the minister found strange enough to write down twice. The Blackwoods, she claimed, never spoke about where they had come from. Other mountain families traced themselves back to a county, a ship, a country. The Blackwoods traced themselves back to the hollow, and no further, as though the hollow were the beginning of them. The older couple, the grandparents, were said to be far older than any grandparents had a right to be, and to move across their own land as if they had walked it for a very long time. That last detail is the one that matters, because when people finally went up into the hollow, weeks after the family stopped coming down to trade, they did not find a simple mountain homestead. They found foundations, long, straight walls of dressed stone, fitted so tightly that a knife blade could not slide between the blocks. They found the base of a structure far too large to be a barn, with a floor of cut flagstones and the remains of what looked like a channel built for moving water. And they found no trace of the 11 people who had lived there. What they did find, scattered near the largest foundation, were a few iron tools worn smooth by some use no one could name. Now here is where the official story and the physical evidence stop agreeing with each other. According to the county, the upper hollow had never been settled. There was no Blackwood parcel because there had never been a Blackwood family. When a land dispute in 1863 forced a clerk to pull the survey maps for that district, the section covering the upper hollow was blank, not empty in the sense of unclaimed land, blank in the sense of missing. The surveyor's original field book, the handwritten notes taken on site with measurements and landmarks, was missing 3 pages, and the numbering on the remaining pages had been altered so that, At a glance, nothing appeared to be gone at all. Someone had gone to enormous trouble to make the hollow look like it had always been empty. So what actually happened on the night the Blackwoods disappeared? The honest answer is that no one wrote it down, because by the time anyone thought to ask, there was nothing left to record. But we can reconstruct a rough sequence from the few accounts that survived being cut, burned, or rewritten. Sometime in April of 1859, the people in the valley below noticed a light in the upper hollow, not firelight. Eliza Furman described it as a steady white glow, low against the ground, visible through the trees for most of one night and gone by morning. 2 other families in the valley mentioned the same thing to the minister years later, independently, without knowing the others had spoken. A low white light, one night, never again. The morning after, the creek that ran down from the hollow ran thick with mud and silt for 3 days, as though something upstream had collapsed or been buried. When it cleared, the Blackwoods did not come down to the mill. They did not come down the following week either. And when a group of men finally rode up the wagon road to check on them, they found that the road itself simply ended. It climbed the ridge as it always had, and then, at the mouth of the hollow, it stopped at a wall of fresh earth and stone, as if the entire entrance had been filled in from the inside. They dug. Of course they dug. And what they uncovered underneath the fresh fill was not soil. It was the same fine-dressed stone that made up the old foundations, except here it formed an arch, a deliberate opening, packed solid with mud and rubble. The men who did the digging said the mud was the strangest part. It was not mountain clay. It was a fine grey silt, almost like ash, the kind you would expect at the bottom of a lake, not near the top of a ridge. One of the diggers, a young man whose account reached the minister second-hand, said that when they cleared enough of the arch to shine a lantern through the gap, the light did not stop where it should have. It carried on into a space that went back further than the ridge itself should allow, a room or a passage cut into rock that no one in the valley had ever known was there. They packed the fill back in before nightfall. Not one of them would say why, only that the air coming out of the gap was cold in a way that April air has no business being. Before we move on to what the county did next, stop for a second. What you just heard about the sealed arch and the grey silt is the part that changes everything. But it only makes sense when you see it written out next to the digger's own account, the lake bed silt. The buried passage, it's all in the document linked below. Take 5 seconds right now, grab it, and then come back. Because what comes next builds directly on it. The link is in the description. QR code is on your screen. They never reached the other side. The county sent an official party the following spring, and that party filed a report. The report is one of the documents that still exists, though it has clearly been edited. It states, in plain language, that the upper hollow was surveyed and found to be uninhabited, that there was no evidence of any structure, and that the earlier accounts were the product of, and I am quoting the report directly here, unreliable memory among the mountain people. Every physical thing the diggers had described was now officially declared to have never existed. There is one more thing about that report worth noticing. It is signed, but the name of the man who signed it does not appear in any other county document from that year, before or after. A commissioner who existed for exactly 1 page, long enough to declare a hollow empty, and then never again. When you go looking for him the way you would go looking for anyone else in the record, you find the same clean edge, the same tidy gap. The man who erased the Blackwoods appears to have been erased himself, as though the work required someone who was never quite there to begin with. This is the pattern that people who study these events keep running into, and it is the reason a story like the Blackwoods matters far beyond one hollow in Virginia. It is not the disappearance that is impossible to explain. People vanish. Families move, die, get buried in unmarked graves and forgotten. That happens, and it is sad, and it is ordinary. What is not ordinary is the erasure that follows, the cut pages, the renumbered field books, the official reports that contradict the physical stone still sitting in the ground. Because a family that simply died would leave a hole in the record, the Blackwoods left something different. They left a hole that someone had carefully patched, so that from a distance the record would look seamless and complete. And once you learn to see that particular kind of patch, you start finding it everywhere. Across the Appalachians, and far beyond them, there are hollows and valleys with the same signature. Foundations too old and too fine for the people who supposedly built them. stonework with no record of a builder, local names for places that appear on no map, census districts where the population numbers do not add up because a parcel has been quietly removed, and in more than a few of them the same detail keeps returning, a layer of fine grey silt sitting exactly where no ordinary flood should ever have reached. Always the same silt. Always the same absence in the paperwork, as if one steady hand had moved from valley to valley doing the same quiet work. 2 counties to the south, in the same decade, there is a nearly identical hole. A settlement marked on an 1,851 map as a cluster of 6 households, gone from the 1,860 census, with no deaths, no sales, no migration filed. The map that showed them was later reissued with that corner redrawn as empty woodland. Anyone who compared the 2 printings side by side was told the first one had simply contained an error. It is a strange kind of error that removes 6 households and leaves the roads that once led to them still drawn on the page, ending now at nothing. The mainstream explanation is that these are the remains of early settlers whose paperwork was simply lost. Courthouses burned, records rot, clerks make mistakes, and sometimes that is genuinely all it is. But the Blackwood Hollow was not a mistake. You do not razor a page out of a tax ledger by accident. You do not renumber a surveyor's field book by accident. You do not fill the entrance to a hollow with lakebed silt, carry it up a ridge it could never naturally reach, and then file an official report swearing the whole place was always empty by accident. That is not loss. That is deletion. And deletion requires a hand. So who erases a family? That is the question the surviving fragments never answer, and it is the question that makes people uncomfortable enough to stop asking, because every honest answer is unsettling. If it was the local authorities, then a county government in 1859 had both the motive and the coordination to wipe 11 people and their entire settlement out of history, and no one ever explained why. If it was something larger than the county, some effort that reached across records in multiple districts to keep the same pages missing in the same way, then the Blackwoods were not the target. They were just in the way of something being hidden. And if it was neither, if the light in the hollow and the grey silt and the sealed stone arch all belong to the same event, then the people doing the erasing may not have been covering up a crime at all. They may have been covering up what was already there before the Blackwoods. The finely fitted stone, the channels for water, the structure too large to be a barn. None of it matches a family of mountain farmers in 1859. All of it matches something older, something that was here first, something the official record insists was never here at all. The Blackwoods did not build that hollow. They inherited it. And whatever they inherited, someone decided the world was not allowed to remember. Not the stone, not the silt, not the 11 quiet people who happened to be standing over it when the decision was made. 11 people lived in a hollow in the Blue Ridge Mountains. They had names, and a farm, and a mill, and 3 generations of history in a county ledger. In the span of a single night, all of it went into the ground, and in the span of a single year, the paper caught up, and the ground and the paper agreed to say the same thing, that there had never been anyone there at all. The stone is still up there, the silt is still in the creek bed, the cut edge is still visible on that tax page if you know which volume to pull. The physical world kept the receipt, even after the written world was made to lie. And that is the part worth sitting with. Not that a family vanished, but that vanishing a family from the earth was the easy part. The hard part, the part that took real effort and real coordination, was vanishing them from the page. Someone thought that was worth doing. Someone thought it was worth doing for 11 quiet people in a hollow almost no one had ever visited. Ask yourself what else got the same treatment. Ask yourself how seamless the patch would have to be before you would ever notice it was there. And ask yourself how many hollows you have driven past, how many empty corners of the map you have accepted as always empty, without ever once wondering who made them that way. Decide for yourself who took the trouble to make the Blackwoods disappear. We will be up in these hills again soon. There is far more that was buried here than a single family of 11. And the ground, unlike the record, does not ever forget. It only waits, patiently, for someone finally willing to go up there and dig.